Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are now doing the archive to screen discussion. And on our panel, we have Mrs. Marian Kononga, a veteran actress and filmmaker. Welcome. We have Major Matarirano, a writer to the story of Nehanda, the film. Welcome. And we have Mr. Francis Mukuzunga, a documentary filmmaker on the Zoom call. Welcome. And we have Mrs. Rudo. Thank you very much. So we're going to have our discussion now. Enjoy.
Good afternoon, evening. Thank you all for joining us for our second film-focused discussion for this year's edition of the Zimbabwe International Film Festival. Welcome to those joining us from the live stream. We are here at the Theatre in the Park in Harare. And as you've been told, joining us is Marian Kononga and Major Matarirano, and on the Zoom call, Francis Mukuzunga. And we're just going to have a very brief chat, really. We're talking about from archive to screen. Earlier, we had a talk about the Narratives from Zimbabwe project, which is talking about archiving and documenting our culture, our history, our traditions. And then these two esteemed panelists have both worked in bringing stories out of our history onto the screen. If many of you might remember seeing Marian on the screen in the film Flame, there was obviously a lot of research done and a lot of having to learn her character. So we just want to hear from them what it takes to bring our stories out of the archives onto the screen and the challenges that they've faced, so that our aspiring filmmakers that we're trying to inspire to make more of those stories know what pitfalls to avoid and the right way to go about it. So welcome to you all. I think we'll begin with Marian. If you've got the... Yeah, if you'd like to take us back in time, it's a throwback Thursday. Take us back in time to that time when you made Flame and tell us the experience, how it was for you.
It was my first time on a film set, coming from the township, getting into town, meeting young people, also different from me, but they actually went through what I was going through myself. So it was, I mean, they were old at that time, so they were trying to make me younger to be with the girls. What assisted me was images, seeing some images of those people. And there were some films that would be seeing on ZBC as we were growing up, but you wouldn't see much of the action. I mean, mostly it was like a lot of people running around. Maybe when they are showing like archive footage of the actual war itself, there wasn't much to see. But there were times when, during the pre-production of the film, when we were rehearsing the film, I was put in contact with women who actually went to the war. So they would tell me the stories and what was happening there, their experiences, and the actual army training was done by people from the Zimbabwe National Army. So it gave me, you know, it would be like the actors. We had actors like Chings Chingaira, he's late right now. He was at the front during the time of the liberation struggle. So you'd have like those people telling you some of those things, because one would be sitting as actors, they would be helping me with my character. So there was a lot of help, but what I also found very interesting is like you are dealing with an actual event that actually happened, and it's a historical event that young people also have to learn. When you look at a movie like Flame right now, I mean, my children look at it, they can't even recognize me. They're like, ah, mommy, that's you, what. But I mean, they still look at me like, were you running like that? So, but for them, it's something that they can actually keep seeing, which is what I think like the archives are very important, learning the archives, knowing what happened in the past, because this is reality. Because archives come in different forms. You've got archival photos, you've got archival film reel, like our national film archives, our local film archives, is very rich in history. And some of the storylines that we hear about, or some of the things that are actually happening now, there are some things that you could actually see the footage. I mean, some of the scramble, maybe some of the struggles that we're seeing now, you go through some of the historical footage that happened then, you'll be able to see some of the scenario, like the wearing of masks. It didn't start with us. It happened back then. And you can see even in the archive footage that if you want to replay some of the things, you've got actual footage of things that happened.
Thank you very much for that.
You're welcome.
And maybe we'll move to Mukoma Major. when you started working on the story of Nehanda, the project, how did you go about doing your research? Like, how did the story come to you? I know that there's everything that we read in the history books, but you went and added more. And how did you go about that? What was your process?
Thank you. Basically, Nehanda, the story of Nehanda is a very difficult story to tell if you want to take it at face value. So what drove us to tell the story was the statue that the government was putting in Samora there. We just wrote our proposal to the powers that be and told them what, as filmmakers and artists, as creatives, what we could do, because we had to convince them that not everyone will come to Harare and see that statue, and not everyone was following even that history of Mbuya Nehanda and her exploits. So basically, first thing that we have to know is to be able to portray a spirit, was Nehanda is a spirit. You need to live in the spirit. That is the most difficult part of taking a spiritual posture from the archives. We don't know what was there at that time, but what we can only do, or what we could only do, was to try and reconnect. That is the first thing. So you realize that in doing that, we had to visit quite a lot of traditional sites. I mean, traditional leaders, the existing spirit mediums, if they are still there, but it's also find them. So besides that, we had also to go to the National Archives now to find what was written about the character or the person, Yambuya Charo. So we found a docket that was used to prosecute Charo Nyagaskan in 1898. So it's there with her own statement is there, but I don't know whether she gave a statement or the statement was given to her. And the prosecution witness statements are there, and you realize the charge sheet is there. So we had to create now, it's like taking a skeleton, putting flesh, so that you realize on the story of Nehanda, we had to imagine quite a lot of what was happening at that time. Maybe to mention, it's not my first time to go through the archives in order to develop some facts that will try and put to life. We also did Chinoy 7, those who remember it, the film Chinoy 7, the 7 heroes in Chinoy. So it's something that we had to take from the archives. But it takes quite a lot to do those spiritual things. You need to be spiritual.
Thank you for that input. And we'll now go over to Francis. I understand you are making a documentary that traces your family history. So that's also a different kind of archive that you're bringing to the screen. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Well, good afternoon.
Go ahead, we can hear you.
You can hear me?
We can hear you.
It's been going on and off. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, you just have to speak up a bit. Your sound is a bit faint.
All right. So I was basically saying, going back to my roots is a project that I try to do when I come back home. Since I currently working in the city. The research I was working in money. So it's this year inspired and still doing this time.
Okay, there are times when I can hear, maybe you're leaning
All right,
closer.
let me leave and then rejoin.
Okay, thank you.
You can talk to another panelist. Okay.
All right, great. While Francis is rejoining, maybe we could come back to you, Marion. What was the most challenging thing, apart from the military training, what was the most challenging thing about embodying that character as you were portraying her on the film?
I remember having chats with my Margaret Longo at one point, and then there was Angeline Mafila Kureva at one point, who they themselves had gone to the war, and I remember them telling me stories about what was happening at that time. So the most difficult part was trying to authenticate, to make their character, because I was now not embodying just one character. It was representing all these women who fought in the liberation struggle. So I'd say this was one of the most difficult things, trying to be authentic, though you had help from the directors and other people that would be coaching you and training you, but you yourself carrying all these on the shoulders, that I'm not just acting this one character of Flame, that one character.
Thank you. And Koma Major, what was your biggest challenge that you met when you were writing the story, and then maybe even later on when they were taking the story from the script onto the screen?
You know, when we wrote our proposal, we later realized that we had put a lot of pressure on ourselves. Because when the proposal was taken on board, I was made to write the first 23 pages the first night. But, you know, writing about something that is so powerful, been taken to a cave, and there is Mbira playing, and we are made to connect in a way that we have never done. That is how Chivanhu chedu is chakaimbodwa, and I think we are still young, and some of those things we don't understand, but we did. Because the spirit of Nyanda is a national spirit. One, it's a very powerful spirit. Two, and just for me to wake up and tell the story of her, it's very difficult. I think most of Zimbabweans, you will agree with me. It was the most difficult thing to write the first sentence, the first of the script, just the first. But after going through the prerequisites, it was easy to write within one night, 31 pages. See now.
So basically what you're both saying is it was a very immersive process. You had to really go into there, not just do the research, but be within that world in order to be able to bring it onto the screen. So my question now would be, if other filmmakers as well want to delve into making, films and documentaries around this, would they have to go? Maybe you could find other ways in retrospect. Can you think of maybe, I don't know, you can sit in the National Archives and then it will come to you? Or
to me, it differs. The type of archive material in the film or the documentary that you are doing. If you are doing something that is spiritual, you should be able to understand that world better for you to be able to tell the story from that side. And some other documentaries, what I know about using archives in films and documentaries, one, you should be thorough, one, you should go deeper, two, you should be able to be very factual, especially if you are using archives to form a film or to create the basis of a film. I know some of the fittings, that is the flesh, will then be created in order for you to fit the skeleton so that it can have a life, a body. And so what I'm saying is it just depends on the type of a project that you are doing. But my warning is, if you are doing something that has some connections of the spiritual world, I can say, some we were discussing yesterday that making films is actually spiritual. you should be able to see things before you see them, so that you create something that people will say, yeah, this is good. So what I'm urging my other filmmakers is that learn to be spiritual in your approach to film.
Just to top up on being creative is spiritual. Each one of us, we've got a gift. Even some some can actually just make a film where all those visuals, sometimes even when I edit, sometimes there's an arrangement of footage that I put the footage together and I always ask myself, who did that? When I'm watching it at the end. So we all have our own gifts when it comes to film. And also just going back to, archives. We all know about the National Archives, which has got like film, which has got like newspaper articles. We've got ZBC. They've got also their archives and everything. But we've got living, moving, breathing archives within us, which is interesting with us Zimbabweans. A lot of African history is not written in the book. But if you go to any township, there's an old person who can give you the history of a space, how it started, how the bars were started to build in that. That's a living, breathing archive. If you go to the rural areas, there is no one old person who doesn't have any knowledge which is archived in they themselves. And the best way for us to get it is not just to read it. You can't, that kind of knowledge that they give you is not the knowledge that you read in books. I know there's a book that is written about the indigenous knowledge. And when you actually talk, because it's written in English, but when you actually now talk to an old person and then they explain to you, everything is different. There's a way that we used to do things during the harvest, when a baby is being born, all that. That knowledge, they've got it. It's us sometimes who are refusing to take that, that material and archive it. I was just watching clips of a documentary area of Kwaramba. I'm looking at myself as a filmmaker. I don't depend only on the National Archives. The National Archives can actually give me maybe the moving reel and everything. But when it comes to like detailed information about how those things happen, because English actually, it cuts off.
Gets lost in translation.
Yes, it gets lost in translation. So when I read the book about indigenous knowledge, I read the whole book and I was just like, I don't understand all these things. But they had like names, like Shona names. Then one time I was sitting with these old gogos in the village there, and I kept mentioning all those things. And together they start explaining, you want to understand how to, to prepare your field. When your field, you don't eat the harvest first. You give it to the animals, you give it to the baboons or something like that. They have to eat first, so they don't finish your whole field. The baboons know they don't finish your field. If you don't give them, they'll finish all your field. So it's all that indigenous knowledge that we've got with the breathing, living archives. Even now when we are sitting here, I think we've got young people. I'm 46, maybe there's someone who's 60 or 70. That one to me can be a moving, breathing archive also that I can go to and tap into for information that I need. And as filmmakers, I think we also need to make use of living, breathing archives and not only depend on what is written on text in English, because a lot is lost in translation.
Okay. Thanks. So I think that resonates with what was being said in the previous session with Mr. Mnyati and Mnyati Morowe, where they were talking about how they traveled around the country with the narratives from Zimbabwe Project, and they actually spoke to these elders and the traditional leaders, and they got all these stories on camera, so this time of them speaking in our languages and telling us exactly how it was, because I think the one challenge we have is our living, breathing archives are now passing on to the next world, and we are no longer living in such close proximity as we used to back in the day. And even worse now with the pandemic, we're in isolation. I think many of us didn't manage to travel home last Christmas, and this time, you're uncertain, so you don't get to spend as much time with those older family members. So it's just a great point that you brought in to, again, emphasize the importance of the narratives from Zimbabwe Project. And I think you were maybe about to add something on as well? No? I thought you were.
No, I thought maybe I'd created the path fortunate ukuthi by making in terms of being visible. But I was also following. It's only that where I used to be or where I come from, we don't actually value films as a vehicle for development, for example. And we should be able to say now, how can film develop the country? How can film be part of the national development strategy if we are going to use that? Or how can we resuscitate, if that is was what the Marians of that time to benchmark that with our current efforts and at least come up with some projects that will all be able to be very proud of our own. You see now, that is maybe for now.
Maybe I have one more question. I think it's something, I've had conversations about it, the issue of artistic license. When you are creating a historical film, you know, how much of your own imagination are you able to put in and get away with, you know, as it were? How much of your own, you're saying you added some flesh here and there, you know, so just tell us about that, you know, how far do you go in adding flesh to a
tradition? From the interviews, the interface that we did with the traditional leaders, you develop a certain, I mean, using your history now, that Vanchikura, this is how I was being told about Mbuyane. So you create a posture, an individual who has both Anura Ramapanyama, then spiritually. And when she is living within the human flesh, what are the trends that are mostly, I mean, that were possibly going through her at this period, 1898 or 1890, whatever? Then you create those things from what those are additives now. You're just adding flesh, but within the scope of time and space.
Marion, would you like to add to that as well? How much of yourself did you then, as an actress, decide, I think I want to do this in this way, and then you just put it in there, you know, without the director having told you, but you kind of added a bit of your own touch?
Most of the things I was doing there, it was guided. I had a lot of training that side, and each time it go on camera, there's, you know, at that time we're not shooting with cards like what we are doing now, right, where the footage, people can shoot for like 30 minutes, one scene, 20 takes. This was film reel, which was very expensive by then. So, I mean, going in front of the camera, you had to do it right. There's a lot of rehearsals. I mean, there was a lot of preparation before I went onto the camera. By the time I went in front of the camera, I had become that character. I'd become Flame, and it's from reading in the story, from hearing, from reading in the script, and also just having your imagination, like, I mean, what kind of a person would she be? So, I mean, with all the guidance and with all the training and all the preparation that was done for me to become that character, you had no choice but to become that person. From the voice, from the movement, from the walk and everything. I don't know, as an actress, you start feeling, I mean, it wasn't like method. I didn't have any training in acting at that time. This is how I'm going to deliver these lines. Flame, I'm soldier, no famba so, you know, and yeah, but I mean, I wasn't doing it myself. There was, I think I would have like, I mean, 20 eyes looking at you at that time in front of the camera, and like I was part of the production also. So they're like people looking at you, so every move that you did in front of the camera, you had people watching you and guiding you. But also just with artistic license, I think with historical films, if you get your facts right, some of the things you recreate, because you want to recreate a world that's got everything, that's functional and everything. So yeah, you are free to use your artistic license as long as you've got your facts right. They are factual things that people know this happened at that time, but when people are watching a film, they also want to be entertained. So yeah, get your facts right for those who scrutinize and say, ari kunyepa uyu, mbuyane handava nambonzwai, or zvinonzi vakanzwai. So you get those facts right, you put them in, but the rest you leave it to the imagination. Even maybe the houses that they lived, then maybe no one who didn't have like an actual structure of how the houses looked. What he had was pictures that were taken by, I don't think at that time there was any black person who was owning a camera. It's white people were taking from the artistic angle and everything. And maybe we've got sketches of drawing from the rock paintings and everything. So you need to really use your artistic license to fill up all the small gaps so your story becomes believable.
You mentioned recreating a world. I don't know if I could ask either of you there, but I'm sure you were involved in the actual production. How were you able to bring back that environment, the scene, the sets of those places that we had? I know I recognized one of the places was sort of in town, but how much work actually went in to bringing back the 1800s onto the screen for us?
Yeah, I don't want to lie. There was a lot of work to try and get nearer to 1890s. But with the rate at which Zimbabwe developed into modernity from that time, you realize that even our courtroom was, to me, because I was inside, it was maybe a 1920 court. It was an 1898 court. It had a lot of things that were not there in 1915. So we had to be closer, not to be real, but to be closer. We just had to be closer. You realize that there are also even the outside, the introductory, that what do you call it? Yekuta introduce court. We had to take a building that was built in 1902. It was close. It was built in 1902. We had to go to National Museum and Monuments, convince them that we had to use that thing. But inside it was different, but outside it was like what it was. So it was actually very, 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 I don't want, one difficult, because most of those buildings, in terms of infrastructure in Zimbabwe, they are either too dilapidated or they no longer exist. Even the church scene that you see, if you are going to, we had to travel to Nyanga because there are very few still existing church buildings that were built in the 1890s, when those well before, even before 1890s, because I think missionaries, they came first, they built those things, but they are very few. We had one in Ulawa, then that one in Nyanga. And the Dombosha one, there's Chishawasha one. It's now where Father Richards was ministering. So we are saying, one, it took time for those locations. Two, to make sure that to pan a bit, or at least to, it was very difficult. But we tried. I think we tried.
I think it was a great effort indeed, in my opinion. And for those who, I think people are now also coming in to see the film itself. We are showing a screening of the story of Neanda just after tracing his family's migration. And migration is also an issue that was discussed earlier in the presentation about the narratives from Zim Project. So as we're running out of our time, I just want to thank you both yet again for coming and joining us and having this conversation. And for those who have not seen Flame, I see some very young people in the audience. We hope we can maybe have a retrospective screening of it at some point, and we'll call you back again, Sisimani, and you just guide us through those scenes and talk about them. But for now, we're going to have a screening of the story of Neanda. We hope you can all join us. We hope those who are joining us virtually are able to continue and watch that film as well. So thank you very much, and continue to support and participate in the Zimbabwe International Film Festival. Tomorrow we will be at the Zift Hub, and we have an exciting, amazing